Hi, this is Joseph Crudup. Welcome to my story. Today I continue to read a part 4 of the series of Mahalia Jackson, The Voice of Gospel and Civil Rights. We have we began on page 73, starting number 7. Number 7, Civil Rights, Television, and the Movies. Leaders on the Montgomery bus boycott believe in a nonviolent protest. Indiana's Mahana's Cary Graham was their inspiration. He had led a nonviolent movement to help his country gain independence from Great Britain in 1947. Although the Montgomery boycotters believe in peaceful protests, many white people respond to their actions with violence, even bombing in Dr. King's home. Incidentally warned Jackson that her life might be in danger in Montgomery, but she still agreed to sing. Jackson's concert was scheduled for December the 6th, 1956. By the time the U.S. Supreme Court had ruled in Bolivar versus Galley that the bus segregation laws were unconstitutional, that ruling had not been put into effect in Montgomery yet, and so that the bus boycott continued. Jackson and Mordor Falls staying with Vanilla and the Rollins family, and Bogady's family, and Montgomery. By noon, people began to crowd into the church where Jackson's concert would be held that evening. The number of people grew so large that loudspeakers were set up in the streets so that upper floor could hear her. That evening, Jackson started her concert with a quiet song, "I Heard a City Called Heaven." Her eyes were closed as she sang softly. But before long, she had the audience walking, and they rose to their feet when she sang, "We Were On Up," a little hollow. She quieted the crowd by closing the concert with a tribute to the holiday season, Silent Night. When Jackson went home, she could feel happy about the torn out and the money raised. But a short time later, the home was bombed. The explosion damaged the living room and the bedroom when Jackson had slept. The bus boycott finally ended on December the 24th, 1956. That was when federal injunctions were served on Montgomery, forcing the city to comply with the Supreme Court's ruling. Northern states did not have segregated laws, but there were racial prejudices. Jackson faced it head on in 1957 when she tried to buy a house in Chicago. She had saved her money and invested in some of it in the real estate, including buying the apartment house when she left. But Jackson liked to practice singing when she was at home, which bothering her neighbors, even though they were my teen tenants. She later wrote, "The people still came flying upstairs to scold me when I sang loud to myself." She believed that in her own house, she would be able to sing wherever she wanted. In the house, Jackson would also have more room for great guests. The apartment was a center of activity with friends coming and going. Often her guests joining her in the kitchen when she cooking up traditional Southern meals. One time, during an interview with a reporter at her apartment, Jackson prepared Creole gumbo and New Orleans style stew. People seem to think it's a little odd for a singer like me to do her own cooking and housework like I do. But this is the real part of me, Jackson told the reporter. I was doing this long before I even thought I'd be a singer. Jackson began her search for a new home by driving through neighborhoods and looking for sale signs. When she saw one, she would start to ask about the price each time. The white arms the white arms would turn her away, claiming that the house had already been sold or that they had changed their mind about selling. Jackson was not prepared for the reaction. It had not occurred to her that she would not be walking outside the African American community. Finally, a real estate agent fired a white soldier in Raleigh to sell his home to Jackson. It was a red brick style house in a quiet neighborhood. The neighbors were not pleased. Even before she moved in, she received phone calls from people threatening to blow up the house. After she moved in, shots were fired through a front pistol window. Jackson was out of town at the time for the concert appearances, but when she got home, she called Mello Richard Daly. He posted police outside her house for her protection. The incident received national attention when the well-known journalist Edward R. Morrow asked him to interview Jackson at her home. His television show, Person to Person, arrived nationally on the CBS network. Jackson used the interview as an opportunity to try to improve her relationship with her neighbors. She invited local children to her house for an ice cream and cake during the interview. Many came, but it did not change what had already begun to happen in her neighborhood. For sale signs started popping up as each white family moved out, a black family moved in. White people predicted that the neighborhood would turn into a slum, but that did not happen. Laws remaining green tinted. House were well maintaining it, and children still walked through the neighborhood on their bicycle. Not much changed, except the skin color of the residents. In the meantime, King and Ability continued to protest segregation. In 1957, they founded an organization called the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. The SCLC was primarily backed by African American churches, and its goal was to bring about equal rights through nonviolent demonstrations. The first major event sponsored by the organization was the prayer program for Freedom, held at the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. on May 17, 1957. That date was chosen for a special reason. It was the third anniversary of the Supreme Court's Brown versus Board of Education Authority, ruling that segregation in public schools was unconstitutional. Outside the Lincoln Memorial, Jackson seemed a spiritual. I've been burger and I've been scoring. Dr. King, the last of 14 speakers, delivering his first national address. Also that year, Senator Diane Shore invited Jackson to appear on her television variety show. Over the next few years, Jackson made guest appearances on many television shows. Hosts of some of those programs, including the famous singers Bing Crosby and Perry Como, and popular comedies Steve Allen, Ray Skelton, and Milton Berle. She also made returns return visits to Ed Sullivan's show and did get great appearances on Nat King Cole's program. Cole was the first African American to have a national television show. Jackson had mixed feelings about working on television. One thing she did not like was the time in the middle. She was allowed only a essential amount of time for a song. I lose to sing in shorts till the spirit comes. Here they want everything done in 2 or 3 minutes. She explained. Jackson also believed that television producers were trying to change her. I always got the feeling that some of those producers and studio people were trying to slip me up, turn me into the commercial entertainer, she said. The good thing about television was that it gave her exposed to the whole new group of people. As Jackson became better known, jazz promoters tried to get her to sing in nightclubs. Some nightclub owners even offered to quit serving drinks while she sang, believing that it was the serving of liquor that kept Jackson from singing in the clubs. But Jackson still turned down their offers. I have many friends. I have many fine friends who entertaining nightclubs and theaters, but it's not the place for my kind of singing, she said. Jackson did appear at the fourth annual Newport Jazz Festival held in Newport, Rhode Island. In July 1957, she sang during a Sunday afternoon program that was devoted to gospel music. Other performers, including the Charlie Ward Singers and a group called the Drinkers, revealed Crudup Jackson's performances as a highlight of the festival at the festival. Mahalia Jackson, a woman on an email, missing on favor, done me in the afternoon on Crudup Walk. One Crudup Walk. Jackson received another request to sing for a jazz project for her friend Dick Ellington. He wanted her to record a song for his black, brown, and British studio. A studio is a longer work made up of several musician pieces related to the particular theme. Black, brown, and British was Ellington's music history of African Americans in America. Ellington first introduced the suit at a concert in Carriage Hall in 1943. It got a cool reception from both critics, and the diners. Over the next few years, Ellington continued to work on the suit, recording some parts of it. In 1956, he decided to explain a spiritual theme that ran throughout the pieces. He added lyrics to the fourth section, which is titled Come Sunday. Ellington never considered anyone except Jackson to sing the spiritual section. He sent her the music and then following up with several people calls to proceed her to do it. 2 years passed before they managed to get together to record in Los Angeles with Ellington's artists. It was Jackson's first recording with such a large group. Jackson and Ellington performed the suit at the 1957 Newport Jazz Festival, held during the 4th of July weekend. Jackson also had her own concert during the festival. It began shortly after midnight on Sunday. Ladies and gentlemen, the Master of Ceremonies announcement. It is Sunday. It is Sunday, and it is time for the world's greatest gospel singer, Miss Mahalia Jackson. Jackson sang about a dozen songs, including Didn't It Rain, a lively number about Noah's Ark and the 40 days and 40 nights of rain. People in the audience clapping, shouting to the music, but there was total silence when she sang the Lord's Prayer. Some bowed their heads as they listened. Clubbers recorded Jackson's concert live, although some songs were later recorded at the studio with an Adonis edit in. The album was released as Live at Newport 1958. Jackson also made her film debut in 1958 with a small role in St. Louis Blues, starring Nat King Cole. In 1959, she played herself singing a gospel song in the movie Entertainer Life, starring Lorna Turner. Another highlight for Jackson in 1959 was being invited to sing at the White House for President Dwight D. Eisenhower and the First Lady. Everybody was so nice, and before I was thought they were all clapping right with the music. She recalled. Jackson had often commented that white people in her and Dallas did not get the clapping right. They clap on the beat instead of off the beat. She sometimes joked at her concert, asking them to stop clapping along with her song. That's enough, darling, she once said. I know you're enjoying. I know you're enjoying yourself, but you just ain't clapping all right. If you don't stop, I'm gonna sing something slow. Jackson had come a long way from the small churches where she had begun her career, but when her spirit needed forces, she knew where to go. Those home churches are my filling stations, she said. By the end of 1959, she was talking about building her own temple. Number 8. Traveling to the Holy Land. Jackson wanted to help future gospel singers and musicians. Part of her plan was to build a temple in Chicago. Although she was a Baptist, she wanted her temple to be for all faiths and all races. She envisioned a holding service that there would be broadcast nationally. There would be also be music class and guidance for those interested in a career in the gospel music. Jackson began serving at to finish her dream, but there was a little time in her schedule to work out in details. She was busy with concerts and recording. In February of 1960, she recorded the album The Power of the Glory. The Power of the Glory with a personal fate Oscar. Such an Oscar. Jackson still had doubts about singing with an Oscar, but in the end, she liked the album. She also didn't want Faith coming to doing a job. One of the best LPs that I made with Pacing Faith because he is a very strict stern man when you get in the studio. No monkey business, she said. Others were not as happy with the album. Some of Jackson's fans did not like the way her music had been changing since she signed with Columbia. They felt that her best recordings were her early ones with Apollo, where she sang with only a piano and an organ. Jackson admitted that she was not entirely happy with her recording company. One thing I'll say about Columbia is that they put me in a new field, she said. They got me on TV and they paid me well. The only thing they haven't been too popular about is my songs. I like to sing the songs I feel. They got ideas of what's commercial. At Columbia's organ, she began singing some popular music, such as Danny Boy, Summertime, and Sunrise, Sunset. Many who heard her in concert thought she sounded much better in person than she did on her records. One reason was that she continued to sing with only a piano and an organ at her concert. Another reason was that Jackson had such an unforgettable stage princess. Miss Jackson does not Miss Jackson does not give concerts. She creates and experiences a revealable that experiences with a combination of Jackson's strong, rich voice and her belief in the songs she sang. People told Jackson that they had been healed listening to her music, and for that she was grateful. You can't reach or uplift people in this way through a musical, mechanical mirror, such as radio or records or television. Sending directed to a live and dance is the only way, she said. In the spring of 1960, Jackson gave a concert at Constitutional Hall in Washington, D.C. in 1939. Sarah Moore Anderson had been barred from performances in that same hall because she was black. Things was changing, but Jackson knew that there was a long way to go. She continued her work for civil rights. Jackson had become good friends with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He visited her wherever he was in Chicago, and many civil rights planning sessions were held at her dining table. She also gave concerts to raise bail money for civil rights workers who had been arrested. In 1960, black college students finding the students' nonviolent culinary commitment SNCC. They soon came up with a nonviolent way to challenge segregation in public places. Their protesters were called sit-ins. The first was in Greensboro, North Carolina. Four African American students sat at the whites-only lunch counter at the Woolworth department store. They were refused service, but they did not go away. They sat quietly at the counter until closing time. The next day, they were black. They were back. The next day, they were back, with even more African American students taking part in the sit-in. This was just the beginning. Other students began participating in sit-ins at the movement gradually spread to other cities and to other types of business, including supermarkets, liberties, and movie theaters. Many of the students were arrested, and many were victims of police brutality, but they did not quit. In October 1960, the sit-in movement arrived in Atlanta, Georgia, where Dr. Martin Luther King was then living. He was arrested at once at one of those sit-ins and sentenced to 6 months in the Georgia State Penitentiary. King's friends and advisors worried about what might happen to him in prison. They turned to the federal government for help. President Eisenhower and Vice President Richard Nixon both decided not to intervene. At that time, Nixon was campaigning to be elected president. King's advisor contacted the other presidential candidate, U.S. Senator John F. Kennedy. Kennedy asked his brother Robert, who was a lawyer, to look into the situation. Robert Kennedy contacted the judge in Georgia who had sentenced King. The next day, King was free on bond, and a court appeal had been filed. That act won John F. Kennedy but support from African Americans. He was elected president by Mahalia in 1960. In November of 1960, shortly after Kennedy's election, Jackson was asked to sing the Star Spangled Banner at the inaugural event in Washington, D.C. on January 19, 1961. The day of the event, a blizzard dropped almost 8 inches of snow on the city. Traffic slowed to a crawl. The event was delayed to give ticket holders more time to arrive. Although the entertainment started almost 2 hours late, The evening went on as planned. At dinner for the cast after the show, Jackson met Kenny for the first time. She was thrilled when he told her how much he enjoyed her music. The next day was clear but cold as Jackson sat in Wonderland Blessers to watch as Kennedy was sworn in as president. She believed that Kennedy would work for the end to segregation. That gave that gave her hope. On January 27, 1961, Jackson joined other performances at Congress Hall in a concert to raise money for the Sutton Christian Leadership Conference. Then she and Benedict Falls began a 2-month tour of performances throughout the United States, where they traveled. Jackson's agent made an agreement for the North European tour. Jackson had been disappointed that illness prevented her from seeing the Holy Land during her first European tour in 1952. She made sure her agent allowed time for the visit to the Holy Land on this trip. On March 27th, Jackson and Franz boarded in the SS United States in New York and set sail for Europe. By now, Jackson had been on the road since late January. She was seconded during the Oslo virus and exhausted from touring. She spent most of the time resting in her cabin. By the time they reached England, she was feeling stronger. The first stop was London. Jackson appeared on a television show and then prepared for her concert at the Royal Albert Hall. It had been 9 years since her last concert there, but the money was still fresh in her mind. She had been very sick then and had not given enough good performances. She prayed this time would be different. 6,000 people filled the Royal Albert Hall for her concert. Others had to be torn away. They clapped and cheered for Jackson on stage and again after the concert as she exited through the stage door to a waiting car. A reviewer for London's New Statesman called her the most majestic voice of faith of their generation. The next day, Jackson sailed across the England Channel and then took a train to Germany. In Frankfurt, she performed at the Colgan Cassidy Hall. The lighting was poor and the microphones were not working, but the dance was fairly exhausted. Even after 12 encores, the congressional shell for more. They did not leave until the police showed up to send them on their way. Jackson's next concert was at the Mahalia in Hamburg. Then she moved on to the East Berlin East Germany. After World War II, Germany had been split into East Germany and West Germany. East Germany was controlled by communists. Under this type of the government, people are not allowed to own property, so the government seizing land, banks, and businesses. The communist government ruled by force. When Jackson arrived, armed soldiers were policemen in the streets to keep citizens from protesting against the government or escaping to West Berlin. They checked Jackson's papers as she entered the city. It was Jackson's first trip into the communist country, and the soldiers made her uneasy. She had heard stories about people disappearing after protesting against communists. The presence of the soldiers made those stories seem real, but they did not have an effect on Jackson's concert. Seats in the sports players were filled, and Sonny Dante's members stood on balcony steps and sat on the floor, while armed soldiers and tanks patrolled patrolling the streets outside the hall. The crowd inside was crying as Jackson sang, "Let there be peace on earth." When she finished, they stood and shouted their approval. The manager told her that he had not heard such cheering since the Nazi director Adolf Hitler spoke there in 1938. His words made Jackson shout. I shudder to think that Hitler had stood there and cried for war. She loved what Jackson was only halfway through her tour, but already the concepts and the travel between locations were wearing her down. Although she did not like to fly, she felt it was necessary now so she could save her energy for her concerts. Flying would take less time than energy for her than traveling by train, giving her more time to rest in her hotel rooms. The delay after the Sports Blast concert, she boarded a plane for Copenhagen, Denmark. People in Europe, people in Europe, for Callahan, people in Europe were aware of the civil rights movement in the United States. A reporter in Copenhagen asked Jackson about it. Did she feel she was treated unfairly in America because of her race? Jackson knew that the reporter hoped to get a G court, but she would not say anything against her country. She told the reporter that she had experienced many hard times in her life, but they were not related to the color of her skin. Columbia recorded Jackson's concert in Stockholm, serving for release later as a live album. From there, Jackson traveled to the Northland for the concert in Amsterdam. She went on to Paris and back to Germany for concerts in Mahalia and Isa. Her final European concert was in southern Switzerland. In Rome, Jackson had in diners with the Pope. Then she went by train to Naples, where she bought a share of bonds for the Holy Land. She had only one concert scheduled there in Tel Aviv, Israel. Until then, she could go street scening. She could go sightseeing. The ship docked in Lombard. From there, Jackson went to Damascus, Syria, where she began her journey to Jerusalem by car. The driving sessions to her was a large Arab man. Jackson called him Fritz because he wore a red fez and felt hot slap like a cone with a flat top instead of the point. Fritz drove fast and then road was bumping and narrow. Jackson held on with one hand and used to the other one to poke Fritz when she would want him to slow down. We went racing down through this desert with me poking and hollering and him telling me he had never been treated that way before by any woman and he would like to come to the United States and marry me, Jackson recalled. Jackson told him she would not marry such Jackson told him she would not marry such a bad driver. They stopped at the River Jordan and Jordan past Jericho. Then Jackson was reminded of the biblical story in which Joshua brings the walls of Jericho down with a mighty shout from his men. The next day, Jackson visited several places she had read about in the Bible, including Bethlehem, the Garden of Gethsemane, and Old Jerusalem. She knelt and prayed in the church now Calvary, the hill outside Essex, Jerusalem, where Jesus was crucified and died. My dreams had come true, she said quietly. She had finally seen some of the scary places that she had read about in her Bible and sing about in her music. Dean was on the concert in Tel Aviv. More than 2,000 people crowding into the auditorium. Some were Christians and some were Jews. Both of them could not understand English, but now the differences appeared to the mouth. Everyone was captivated by Jackson's performances. When she got to Joshua fit the battle fought Joshua fit fought the battle of Jericho. The walls of the auditorium almost came down, wrote a reporter for Time magazine. After the program, Jackson went home to Chicago. At that time, the civil rights movement was entering a new phase. That will be the end of the story. Part 5 and the final part 5 is coming out tomorrow, starting on November 9. Till then, this is Jessica Crudup. Have a great night and God bless.